She was 19 years old when she dropped out of Stanford. By 30, she was the youngest self-made female billionaire in America, worth $9 billion. CEOs wanted to meet her. Presidents took photos with her. The media calls her the next Steve Jobs. There was just one problem. Her revolutionary blood testing technology, the thing her entire $9 billion company was built on, didn't work at all. This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, how one woman convinced the world she'd revolutionized medicine, how she raised $900 million from some of the smartest investors on the planet, and how it all came crashing down when one question was finally asked. Does this thing actually work? Spoiler alert, it didn't. Because while Elizabeth was on magazine covers and giving TED Talks, the blood tests were failing, patients were getting wrong results, and people's lives were at risk. But let's start at the beginning, because to understand how this fraud happened, you need to understand how good Elizabeth Holmes was at lying. And trust me, she was really good. 2003, Elizabeth Holmes is a 19-year-old Stanford student studying chemical engineering, and she has an idea. What if you could run hundreds of medical tests from just one drop of blood? No needles, no vials, just a tiny finger prick. Sounds amazing, right? Revolutionary, even. So she drops out of Stanford, takes her tuition money, and starts Theranos. The name, combination of therapy and diagnosis. Very clever. Her pitch to investors is simple. We're going to change healthcare forever. Make testing cheaper, faster, easier. And people bought it. Why? Well, partly because the idea was genuinely good. Partly because she was a Stanford dropout, and apparently that's all you need to be the next Steve Jobs. But mostly because Elizabeth Holmes was an incredible salesperson. She wore black turtlenecks, just like Steve Jobs. Subtle. She deepened her voice, like artificially, made herself sound more authoritative, more CEO-like. There's footage of her speaking normally. Then you hear her in interviews, and it's like she swallowed gravel. The transformation is unsettling. And it worked. Investors loved her. The media loved her. Everyone wanted to be part of the next big thing. By 2004, she's raised $6 million. By 2010, $90 million. Theranos is valued at $1 billion. And here's the thing, they still haven't proven the technology actually works. But nobody's asking questions because Elizabeth is convincing. She's passionate. She tells stories about her uncle dying from cancer, how if they'd caught it earlier with better testing, he'd still be alive. She makes it personal, emotional, about saving lives. Who's going to question that? Who's going to be the person who says, hey, can we actually see this thing work? Turns out, almost nobody. 2013. Theranos launches in Walgreens across Arizona. You can walk in, get your blood tested with just a finger prick, and get results in hours instead of days. The device they're using? It's called the Edison, named after Thomas Edison. Obviously. The Edison is supposed to run over 200 different tests from one drop of blood. Cholesterol, glucose, infections, cancer markers, everything. And people are excited. The media goes crazy. Forbes puts Elizabeth on the cover, the world's youngest self-made female billionaire, worth $4.5 billion. She's on Time's 100 Most Influential People list. She's giving TED Talks. Presidents are meeting with her. Joe Biden visits the Theranos lab. That aged well. Bill Clinton's praising her. Rupert Murdoch invests. The Walton family invests. Betsy DeVos invests. By 2014, Theranos is valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes personally owns half the company. She's worth $4.5 billion. At 30 years old. And she's done it all by never actually proving her technology works. Because here's what's happening behind the scenes. The Edison doesn't work, like, at all. It can maybe run a handful of tests, maybe, and even those are unreliable. So what does Theranos do? They start using traditional blood testing machines, the same ones every other lab uses. But they're still marketing themselves as revolutionary, still telling patients and investors the Edison is doing the work. That's fraud, just straight up fraud. But it gets worse. The tests aren't just unreliable, they're dangerous. Patients are getting false positives for diseases they don't have, false negatives for diseases they do have. Imagine getting told you have cancer when you don't, or being told you're fine when you actually need treatment. That's not just fraud, that's playing with people's lives. But Elizabeth keeps going, keeps lying, keeps raising money. Employees who question the technology? Gone, or threatened with lawsuits. One engineer raises concerns about accuracy? Gone. A lab director says the tests aren't reliable, silenced with legal threats. Elizabeth and her boyfriend, Sunny Balwani, the company's COO, run Theranos like a cult. Secrecy, paranoia. Anyone who questions anything is an enemy. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's living the billionaire life. private jets, mansion in Los Altos, personal security. All funded by investor money for technology that doesn't work. But the house of cards is about to collapse. October 15th, 2015. A reporter named John Carreyrou from the Wall Street Journal starts asking questions. He's been contacted by whistleblowers, former Theranos employees who say the technology is a scam. And John Carreyrou does something nobody else did. He investigates. He talks to lab directors, medical experts, former employees, and they all say the same thing. The Edison doesn't work. October 15th, the Wall Street Journal publishes his investigation. The headline? Hot startup Theranos has struggled with its blood technology. And just like that, the questions Elizabeth avoided for 12 years are finally being asked. Does this actually work? Theranos denies everything. Elizabeth goes on TV, does interviews, calls the article false and defamatory. But Carreyrou keeps publishing. More whistleblowers come forward, more evidence. Then the government gets involved. The FDA inspects Theranos labs. Their findings? The Edison is inaccurate and unreliable. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services investigate. They find the labs are so bad they pose immediate jeopardy to patient health. January 2016, Theranos voids 2 years of blood test results. 2 years. Imagine getting medical tests for 2 years, making health decisions based on those results, and then being told, actually, none of that was accurate. Walgreens ends their partnership, pulls Theranos out of all their stores. Investors start suing. Forbes revises Elizabeth's net worth from $4.5 billion to zero. By 2016, Theranos is in free fall. Lawsuits pile up. Partners abandon them. The SEC starts investigating. And Elizabeth? She's still trying to save it. She fires Sunny Balwani, throws him under the bus. She does more interviews, tries to repair her image. But it's over. June 2018, Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani are charged with massive fraud. The charges? Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud. They allegedly defrauded investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars and endangered patients with fake blood tests. September 2018, Theranos officially shuts down. The company that was once worth $9 billion, done, finished, bankrupt. But Elizabeth's legal battle is just beginning. Her trial doesn't start until 2021. COVID delays things, legal maneuvering, prep time. And during this time, Elizabeth gets married, has a baby. Sarcastic, tries to humanize herself before trial. Classic move. September 2021, the trial finally begins, and it's wild. Elizabeth's defense? She claims Sunny Balwani, her ex-boyfriend, abused and controlled her. Says he manipulated her, made her do things. She was a victim. Now, was their relationship toxic? Maybe, probably. But does that excuse defrauding investors and endangering patients? The jury didn't think so. The prosecution brings receipts, text messages where Elizabeth brags about fooling investors, internal emails showing she knew the technology didn't work, testimony from employees who were threatened into silence, evidence that she personally approved false reports sent to investors. This wasn't abuse, this was deliberate fraud. January 2022, after 3 months of trial, the verdict: guilty. 4 counts of defrauding investors. She faces up to 20 years per count. She's acquitted on charges related to defrauding patients. The jury couldn't agree on those. But still, 4 federal fraud convictions. November 2022, sentencing. Elizabeth Holmes is sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. 11 years. For a woman who was once the world's youngest self-made female billionaire, she'll spend the next decade in prison. Sunny Balwani, he gets 13 years, sentenced separately. May 2023, Elizabeth reports to prison. She's currently serving her sentence at a minimum security federal prison in Texas. And that $9 billion company? Gone. So what can you learn from the Theranos disaster? First, hype is not proof. Elizabeth had celebrity investors, magazine covers, TED Talks, presidents visiting her lab. None of that meant her technology worked. Don't invest based on hype. Invest based on evidence. Second, ask questions. For years, nobody asked to see the Edison actually work. Investors just trusted her. Journalists repeated her claims. Nobody verified. If someone's asking for your money, make them prove their claims. Third, secrecy is a red flag. Theranos operated in extreme secrecy, wouldn't let investors tour labs, threatened employees who talked. Real companies don't operate like that. If someone's hiding their process, ask why. And fourth, 1 drop of blood can't run 200 tests. This was always physically impossible. Medical experts said so. But people wanted to believe, wanted the story to be true. Don't let what you want to be true override what is true. And finally, fraudsters don't look like villains. Elizabeth Holmes wasn't some obvious scammer. She was a Stanford dropout with a good idea. She wore turtlenecks. She talked about saving lives. She seemed legitimate. That's how fraud works. It looks real until it doesn't. Elizabeth Holmes convinced the world she'd revolutionized medicine. She raised $900 million. She was worth $9 billion. And it was all based on a lie. Not a small lie, not an exaggeration. A lie that put patients' health at risk. A lie that cost investors hundreds of millions of dollars. A lie she maintained for over a decade. And now she's in prison. 11 years. For a woman who once had everything, she lost it all. Because you can't fake science. You can't fake medicine. And eventually, the truth comes out. If you want more financial fraud investigations like this, subscribe, because Theranos isn't even close to the biggest scam we're covering. Next up, Bernie Madoff, $65 billion, 30 years of lies. See you there.